Welcome back everyone, it's Eric from Rare Candy, and today we're going to be going over part 4 of our post-rotation guide for the upcoming format. So if you guys haven't been following this series, I will have a link down below in the description to the rest of the different parts of the series. But we're basically just going to be going over a lot of the important staples that we are going to need to keep in mind going into this coming year's season. Every year we lose a lot of important cards, so we're going over what cards we currently have pre-Darkness Ablaze that we are going to be keeping going into the new season. And today we're going to be looking at gusting effects. You know, traditionally one of the most powerful effects in the game, being able to control what Pokemon is your opponent's active for offensive and defensive reasons. So you get to choose what you want to take a knockout on, or maybe you're trying to stall and keep something stranded active to deck your opponent out or something like that. There's a couple of different options. And, you know, typically we actually usually don't even have this many options. I know this is one of the shorter videos in our post-rotation guide so far, but this is actually a good bit of gusting options compared to a lot of the formats of the past. I think the big one that we lost is going to be Custom Catcher, which is definitely going to be missed. But luckily, I think we still have enough different options at our disposal to be able to pretty consistently gust up whatever we want from our opponent's bench. So let's take a look at what we got. Up first, we have Ninetales. Ninetales has been a very good Pokemon, you know, pretty much a staple in a lot of the ability-based fire decks out there for this 9 Temptations ability. So of course you can discard 2 fire energies from your hand, and if you do, switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active. So even though we did lose Fiery Flint in the rotation, we do still have Giant Hearth, we have Fire Crystal, Energy Retrieval, plenty of ways to get fire energy into our hand whenever we need it. And, you know, Welder is still in the format as well, so fire as an archetype is going nowhere, I don't think. So Ninetales, I still think, is going to be a very good Pokemon going forward, even despite having things like Boss's Orders still in the format. So definitely, I think, among one of the better gusting options that we still have lingering around. So up next, from there, we have Venusaur and Snivy GX. This is a card that's seen some play up until now, you know, a little bit more limited than Ninetales, but as this Shining Vine ability, once during your turn, if this Pokemon is your active, when you attach a grass energy from your hand to it, you may switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active. So of course, Venusaur Snivy is going to be a little bit more limited in the types of decks you can play it in. You know, not only because it's a highly specific type, kind of like Ninetales, but also has to be your active. And if Venusaur Snivy is in your active, it has a 3 retreat cost, which means sometimes it's going to be kind of hard to move this once it is in your active spot. So Shining Vine, I think a little less consistent than Ninetales in terms of the turns you're able to use this, but being able to choose what your opponent brings up is really, really important. And it's not limited to GXs or Vs or anything in particular like that either. So also still, I think a somewhat solid option grass decks will have to consider. Up next from there, we have Appleton. So this is another kind of more recent inclusion to the format, but once during your turn, you can flip a coin. If heads, switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon or bench basic Pokemon with their active. So fun fact about this, whenever we were initially doing our Rebel Clash set review, I was actually really gassed up about this card. I didn't know that it was just basics. I didn't read the card close enough for the translation. So I was initially really hyped about this. But unfortunately, it is limited to just basic Pokemon, which makes this card a good bit worse. And especially as we get more and more VMAXs into the format, this ability gets progressively worse as well. But nevertheless, I mean, there's still a lot of good basic Pokemon that you might want to gust up. We have the Dene GX, we have all the tag teams, we have the new Crobat V coming into the mix after Darkness Ablaze as well. You know, low HP basics for 1 prize decks. So Appleton still is a consideration, I think, especially if you're a deck that is maybe already playing Applin or Flapple in some capacity. I think, you know, finding the space for the 1 of Appleton isn't that unreasonable either. So not quite as strong as something like Ninetales in terms of ability-based gust, but still kind of decent, even though it is on a coin flip. Stage 1s aren't too hard to get into play. So Appleton, you know, not one of the best options, but probably not the worst on this list either. So next we have Hypnos. Is probably a card that has that a couple of you guys might actually have to read. This is not a very popular card, but I think this ability is interesting. So whenever your opponent's active is knocked out, flip a coin. If heads, choose which of your opponent's bench Pokemon becomes their new active Pokemon. So this is a little bit different than Appleton because it's still a coin flip, but it happens whenever your opponent's active is knocked out, which means it doesn't really help you get your knockout. It just kind of makes it more annoying on your opponent's next turn, makes them need retreating methods and things like that. So Hypno, it's kind of a cool card, but I don't think this is among one of the better options that we have on this list. I really wish this was an ability that was on a basic, or I wish this was like an ability that didn't have a coin flip. Like if either of those things have been different, I think this card actually might be kind of decent, but as a result, Hypno probably one of the weaker options. But nevertheless, as usual with these card inclusions in this post rotation guide, I'm trying to give you guys kind of like all of the options, or the vast majority of options. Not all of them are going to be tier 1 or staples, but I want to at least get your brain working and just think about all of the things that we're going to have access to. Up next from there, we have Fium, which is actually, I think, one of my more favorite out of the Pokemon-based gusting options. Whirlpool Suction, even though it's a little bit more limited, you don't get to actually choose what your opponent brings up. It's really cool because it's so easy to pull off. You don't need to do anything other than bench Fiona, then activate its ability. So this is not only good at, playing around like things like Obstagoon that have like locking attacks and things like that, but also sometimes it can just be annoying for your opponent as well, especially like if you are a deck that can like take knockouts via abilities or other like non-attacking methods and take prizes that way. Whenever your opponent promotes something, you can use Fiona a lot of times to force them to promote something different. So Fiona, it's popped up in just a large variety of decks ever since it's been printed. I still think it's a pretty decent card too. So up next from there, getting into our trainer-based form of Gust, we have Great Catcher. This is a card I do think does continuously kind of get worse. This was an amazing card when it was first printed. It was kind of printed right in the middle of, all of the Pokemon GX that we had. But as more and more Pokemon GX are rotating out of the format, and Pokemon EX, of course, also no longer being in the format anymore, Great Catcher does get a little bit worse. Even though it's an item, again, it's only limited to Pokemon GX, and you do have to discard 2 cards from your hand as well. But we do still have Dedenne, which is going to be a staple in most decks still. So Great Catcher alone, just for that reason, will probably still see play. But we still have tag teams as well. So there is some case to be made for Great Catcher, but like I said, I do think this card will progressively see less play as kind of the months go on, and we lose more and more Pokemon GX, and Pokemon V end up outclassing them as time goes on as well. Pokemon Catcher, another more recent inclusion. So flip a coin if heads, switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active. Pokemon Catcher was actually seeing a good bit of play before Boss's Orders got printed as one of the better item-based forms of Gust we've had in the format. And Pokemon Catcher has seen play, actually. I mean, even back when this was Pokemon Reversal and, many, many formats ago, under just a different name, that card saw play. Now, granted, Pokemon Catcher and Pokemon Reversal historically haven't seen a lot of play in formats where we've had other more consistent forms of Gust like Boss's Orders, or in previous formats where we had Lysander and Guzma. But nevertheless, I mean, this is item-based form of Gust. Yeah, I don't think we can overlook that. And I think this is still one of the more, highly considered cards, I think, on the list to include in your deck. But of course, the big one that we have is Boss's Orders. This is a card we just got in Rebel Clash. Kind of makes a lot of these other options that we had up until then much worse. Even though stuff like Pokemon Catcher aren't bad cards, Boss's Orders just in general is going to outclass most of these options. Yes, it's a supporter for your turn, so you can't play a research on the same turn, but just getting that guaranteed switching effect on your opponent's board is just so strong. Every format a card like this has existed in, whether it's Lysander or Guzma, has seen just a ton of play. They've been format defining cards. Boss's Orders is not going anywhere, even while existing in a format with so many other gusting effects. So for that reason, this is probably going to be our best option going forward, kind of as expected, especially since we have things like Eldegoss in the format to reuse this, or Cynthia and Caitlin, or other ways at reusing this. So that is going to be it for this one, guys. Like I mentioned, this is probably one of the shorter of the post-rotation guide videos that we're doing on this channel, but this is actually a good bit of Gust. Like I mentioned, we typically don't have this many in the format at a given time. But like I said, Boss Order is probably my favorite, but what do you guys think? Sound off down below in the comment section. Outside of Boss Orders or any of these other ones, cards that you guys might still consider playing going forward, let us know down below in the comment section. But if you guys did enjoy this content today, feel free to like and subscribe and consider supporting this channel as well by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg or by picking up some merch at rarecandytcg.com. It would mean a lot. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.